If you're Indian and a bunch of white guys show up and say they're going to help you, they're not.
They will never help.
They'll never help you. Don't trust them. How many times do we have to take this lesson?
My hometown messed me up. She won big on a Timmy's Cup. I heard about it at the Rotary Club. That's so Canardian. Don't stop.
This is Canardian, the podcast gossiping about Canadian hometowns. I'm Katie Lohr, author of Pod the North, the newsletter for Canadian podcasters. I am joined by Joel JD Montgrand, an actor that you might recognize from Netflix's live-action Avatar. You might recognize him from season 4 of HBO's True Detective. But JD is also the host and creator of Actors and Ancestors, a film and TV podcast that celebrates Indigenous actors, talks back to Hollywood stereotypes, and looks to the future of Indigenous peoples on screen. JD, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, JD, where is your hometown, and how would you describe the vibe of it in 5 words or less?
Okay, so for this, I'm saying my hometown, because that's where the majority of my life was spent as a young guy, is La Ronge, Saskatchewan. And I would describe it in 5 words or less. Okay, I'll say quiet, beautiful, isolated, cold, and this one is perhaps quarrelsome.
Quarrelsome.
Yeah,
Ooh,
we'll say that.
That's a new word for this show. I think all the vibes that you mentioned are pretty much on par with what I kind of figured out about La Ronge. But here's my tourism pitch for you. Okay, you ready?
Sure. Yeah.
La Ronge, Saskatchewan. Start your adventure, says the town website. The population is somewhere around 3,000 people, and it's a place best known as the capital of northern Saskatchewan. It's a town surrounded by the boreal forest and on a big giant lake, and it's known for its fishing. It's like the place to go fishing, apparently. Mm-hmm. It's known for hunting and just basically all-around outdoorsmanship. La Ronge is part of Treaty 6 and is a traditional territory of the Woodland Cree. Today, La Ronge, the town, shares a border with Lac La Ronge Indian Band, which is the second largest First Nation in Saskatchewan. There is no Tim Hortons in La Ronge, but there is an A&W, a KFC, and a Dairy Queen. Mm-hmm. And because it's the center of the universe, La Ronge is about a 32-minute drive from Toronto, but that's according to Google Maps. You can only go through the States to do that. So, JD, what sticks out to you here? What am I missing?
Did you say a 32-minute drive to Toronto?
32-hour drive. Okay. Yeah, that's a...
I was like, I don't
think
know.
You could even get to Toronto from Toronto in 32 minutes.
Yeah, that sounds all about right. Yeah, it is the fishing capital of the North. I mean, it's a semi-resort town. Like in the summertime, we'd have tons and tons of Americans that come up. Yeah, a bunch of dudes just love to do their fishing, hunting, and all that kind of stuff. And it is sort of a hub because it is the last little community where you can find things like a garage and the just basic grocery stores and things that aren't too ludicrously expensive because there's a highway that goes all the way there. It's a 2.5-hour drive from Prince Albert, which is called the Gateway to the North. And that place has the big hospital and stuff like that, a Walmart and everything. Yes, and like 5 Tim Hortons or something, I think, just to make up for the none. And when I was growing up, we didn't have any of those places you're talking about except for KFC. That was
this is what I was reading, is that apparently the KFC has been around forever.
Yeah.
And then there was also another restaurant that must have been competition with it that I didn't do too much research into, but got a lot of love. Chicken Delight.
Chicken Delight, yes.
And apparently there's a lounge in Chicken Delight.
There was
a fireplace or something.
Wow. Yeah, it had this beautiful patio, screen door entrance, so you could just kind of hang inside, outside sort of deal. And that's probably what I miss most about Saskatchewan in a lot of ways was
it's Chicken Delight.
Chicken Delight. No. It's actually the weather. You get these huge thunderstorms and the rain, and everyone always had these giant patios with screen doors on them, and you just sit there and listen to the thunderous rain. You could have a beer. I was too young for beers at that time, but I'd see people having beers and just chilling out, and It was so nice. Yeah, Chicken Delight. Site of controversy. But yeah.
Wait, there's controversy around Chicken Delight?
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that later.
When I emailed you about this show, you told me that La Ronge was like the most northern place to get like fast food before you go more north or something like that. Like, what is more north than La Ronge?
Oh, well, there's all these little reserves out there. Stanley Mission, Sandy Bay on the way to Flin Flon. And they're small communities. Like we're talking like 100 to a couple hundred people in a lot of these places. And so they don't have much of anything in a lot of them. But they're gorgeous. The people are hardy and amazing. There's a lot of problems with isolation and loneliness. And it's not the vibe of the show, but there is like, there's big drug problems and issues like that have gotten worse over the years.
Yep.
So it's kind of heartbreaking. I went back home recently and I've been hearing some of the stories. And it's not the same from when I was a kid, but there's also a lot of growth. I went again, being back into my hometown last summer and doing a little tour with my mother, and I hadn't been there with her in like 20 years. And so we were going to all of our own little hotspots where we were talking about like, oh my gosh, look at that. That's this rock that I used to love climbing. And it was massive. And then I'm like, oh, it's like 6.5 feet high, right? Like, you're like, oh yeah. And there's the ball diamond we used to play in the trailer park that I lived in. The trailer that I lived in is still there. And I remember how cold it was, because it was like, we had regular winters well below -40. At least for a little stretch at a time. Now that's a real rarity. You might get 1 or 2 days of that, but there was days on end of -40s. And our little trailer, it had ice on the inside of the walls. It was so cold.
Wow.
And my mother and I used to sleep in the kitchen with the oven open and a little bed just to stay warm. It's weird because like it was some of the hardest times of my life being poor. Like, I mean, our furniture didn't have legs,
Wow. Was it just you and your mom?
Just me and my mom for the longest time, with a couple of random roommates. I remember one time we lived with one of her friends who was a roommate, and my cousin, and, off and on, things like that. But it was just mom, and there was like, she was having to make choices at the time of, are we paying the phone bill? Are we paying electricity? Are we paying heat? That kind of thing. So we went through a lot of phone numbers when I was growing up because I repeatedly disconnected, and then no phone for a while, and then getting another phone.
Poverty is definitely a thing still happening in northern Saskatchewan for sure. It was interesting seeing people talk about it online a little bit because they kind of just referred to it as like classic northern problems.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really like articulated.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like expected what it is that's going on there. And that feels very problematic to me. But for a long time, we know that Canadian government has been abandoning First Nations communities. And, we're going to get into that, Joel. Don't you worry. This is that type of podcast. But we're going to do it in a fun way, right? We could talk about reconciliation in a fun way.
Sure. Hell yeah. If anything, that's what we're good at too. I got to give a shout out to everyone up north. We're good at laughing because you just have to.
That's exactly where I'm
laughing
going.
keeps you warm. Yeah.
So I'm kicking off each episode with a dedicated discussion around the vibe of each town. And I really like to do this to set the stage. And these are sort of like the overall vibes that I've gathered in my research on La Ronge. So like outdoorsman's paradise, tight-knit community kind of feel, possibly a little rowdy, and then generally like really buggy. This was something that came up a ton. Everyone is like, pack your mosquito bug repellent, like it's gonna get really buggy. But outdoorsy, tight-knit community, possibly a little rowdy. Like I imagine being a teen up there in the summertime must have been pretty incredible, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I left when I was about 14. And
okay.
Yeah. And growing up at that time, absolutely. Like, it was rough. It was kind of scary being a teenager, but good at the same time. It's just part of being young, I think. But I remember like, I'm getting rolled around by my cousin. He'd be beating me up and stuff like that because he was like teaching me that.
Oh, that's nice.
I
That's
had,
very
yeah,
nice of
exactly. He
him.
was like, I'm teaching you because it's not if you're going to get in a fight, you're going to. So I just got beat up by my cousin a bunch.
Oh, that's nice.
I know,
I'm so happy for you. Well, you spent your summers getting beat up by your cousin.
And bugs. That's where it was. The bugs. So those are the stings. Yeah, there's tons of mosquitoes. There's an old joke. What do you call mosquito repellent in Saskatchewan?
What?
A shotgun. Just because they are those ridiculously, but the big guys aren't the ones that you need to be scared of. But the girls are the ones that bite you. The males are the giant ones.
Who are the girls?
The mosquitoes, the boys and girls of mosquitoes. So the boys are giant and they don't do anything. They're pretty harmless. And but they're the scariest ones. Like people see those guys flying around, because they're literally, I'm making a big, like something the size of an orange big.
Yeah.
And then the other ones are still big, but they're like more like a quarter, slightly around there, bigger.
That's a huge mosquito.
Yeah, exactly. And they bite you, and they're everywhere. So they just win by a war of attrition because you just kind of get tired of constantly slapping at everything, every exposed inch of skin. So, and there was a bunch, and sandflies were really bad too. When we'd go play baseball, like tiny little guys. You don't think that they're going to get through your clothes, but boy, they do. They bite you.
Wow. Okay. Noted. This is hilarious. I just love that. I love when it all comes full circle into the guest of this show really being like, no, yeah, that's definitely the case. The bugs up there are especially huge.
And then and they were. And then again, going back now, things have changed. Like we used to drive and we had to stop.
Bugs aren't the same anymore.
No, they're not. And this is like the existential crises that constantly worry me, right? Because it's just like climate shift is real. And you used to get a windshield full of bugs driving from community to community. And now you do that. And yeah, there's bugs, but not like having to stop and pull over and scrub them down with your bare hands sometimes because it just gets so thick and the front of your vehicle is caked in that,
You
air
cannot
can't
be
get in.
telling the truth right now.
I'm telling the truth. Okay. Anyone that's like 40 and above remembers this. And now like people growing up and they're just like, oh, I got stung by 2 mosquitoes today. And it's like, oh, screw you. You don't know what it's like to be eaten alive. Like, yeah.
Okay, I found a subreddit called Thoughts on Living in La Ronge. So this is somebody who is thinking about moving there from Ontario, asking for any tips or info. Here's what some people were saying. It's the best town in the province, a very unique place. If you like to hike, snowshoe, or paddle, you will love living here. And then this person said, I hope you're from small town Ontario, or you might be in for a shock when you notice that Letterkenny makes this place look small. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, it is that kind of town. Like, I imagine it's slightly bigger now than when I was there. But like at that point, everybody at least recognized each other. I mean, I was a kid. I was like, 12, 13, 14 years old, walking around on my own. And yeah, every face that I saw, I recognized, with the exception of tourists. So like anyone you didn't remember, like, oh, where are they from? Some American. They're out here hunting. I remember there was this older kid in my grade. He had failed once or twice, but he worked as a guide during the summertime. So he would take these American tourists out and show them stuff. And one summer he comes back in, after summer, I mean, in the fall, and we're in school, and he's like, yeah, man, I made some good money this summer, and I was out there taking these guys up north and, taking them out moose hunting. And he's like 15 and I'm like 13. And he's like, yeah, this one guy paid me to kiss a moose. He gave me $100 tip for this. And back then that was also like a ton of money, but they shot this moose. They were taking photos, these weirdo Americans, and they got this 15-year-old boy with them. Like it's crazy, right? The stuff that we grew up with, again, like I was left in hot cars all the time. And, now I would be stolen from my family. They'd be like, you can't do that to kids. Anyway, so this guy, he's out there on his own, guiding these American tourists out. They take these boats, they go camping in the woods, portaging, all this kind of stuff. And they shoot this moose and they say, we just want a photo. We want a photo. Yeah. We'll pay you $100 if you kiss that moose. And they got a photo of him. He said of him fully kissing this dead moose on the lips.
What a story to come back to high school with. Damn.
Yeah, really, right? And he made $100, $100 American
Nice.
dollars.
I gotta say, like, this was one of the first thoughts that I had as I was looking through La Ronge. So one of the things that I did when I was 16 years old, I was an Ontario forest ranger, and it was a program that existed in Ontario only for 16-year-olds, and you would spend an entire summer living at like some sort of like cabiny camp type place owned by the Ontario government, and then you would go and like clear trails and clean up garbage off the side of the highway and like go on canoe trips and do all this fun stuff in the summertime. And I was like, I feel like La Ronge would be like the coolest place to do something like that as a teenager, and to be like a summer laborer as a teenager in La Ronge. But yeah, I guess you just get eaten alive though. So, but or forced to kiss a moose.
To it. Yeah, or forced to kiss a moose for a good sum of money for a kid. Yeah, it really was. I mean, that's the biggest selling point of La Ronge is just this beautiful landscape that no one really connects to unless you are an outdoorsman, or for some reason get involved with somebody. Like I took my partner out there a couple summers ago, and you know, she was like, I never thought I'd ever be out here. And it's like, my God, it's beautiful. And we've cooked up some fish straight out of the river, from catching them to deep frying them, batter, and eating them. 20 minutes between all of that, you know, clean up. And she was like, this is the best fish I've ever had in my life.
Oh,
and I was like, I know it is. I know it is. Can't beat it. And most people will never get to experience that kind of thing, you know?
Okay, so a big part of La Ronge's identity is rooted in indigeneity. I mentioned off the top of the show that the town shares a border with Lac La Ronge Reserve, and it's a pretty significant percentage of people in the population of town that are Cree or Métis. And a big reason for this is that La Ronge was the location of Lac La Ronge, or All Saints Residential School. That opened up in 1907, burned down in 1947. You'd be like, yay, that's great. No, the students were actually displaced again and brought over to Prince Albert instead. They were like brought to decommissioned army barracks, and then eventually had to joined the Prince Albert residential school system instead. So a lot of people, a lot of First Nations people from the area actually grew up as hunters and trappers and speak fluent Cree, but actually have no cultural context or understanding of like what their ancestors went through. They'd have no connection to the land. They just like sort of know these traditional practices, but don't really understand the context behind it. This is a very common story across Canada, but you'll start to see it as a settler a little bit more when you dig into the history of the land and actually talk to people about it. All of that to say, JD, when I say the words cows and plows to you, how do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell me what your understanding of what cows and plows refers to.
Yeah, it's a broader term referring to the literal sense that we were promised actual cows and plows to help farming and irrigation and this kind of a thing that were never delivered upon. And as a result, it contributed to not only the destruction of our culture, because they were requiring us to live in one area of land reserves rather than being a nomadic peoples and hunting and fishing and practicing our language and dance even. Dance was illegal. They were also denying us what they had promised. So everyone was basically trapped and living in poverty and unable to sustain ourselves. Again, side note, that is why bannock, or fry bread in the South as it's more commonly known as, is so universal among Indigenous peoples, because it is just a colonizer's weapon in a sense of control. When you become reliant on these food handouts, which always included flour and sugar, everyone ended up making the same sort of food.
Just for people who aren't as familiar, I'll give a quick little rundown because this is all leading to something hilarious. So in 1876, Queen Victoria is obviously over here colonizing, as you mentioned. She's pretending to make peaceful treaties with First Nations communities and spreading the good word of Christianity. But she wants their land, right? That's all she wants. So she makes a commitment to First Nations communities saying that since they're being forced to move out of their land and into a specific spot, forced to stop hunting and gathering, that and kind of forced into this Eurocentric farming practice that all the colonizers are bringing over. Since they're being forced to do all these things, the Canadian government and the Crown is going to help First Nations out and help them get situated, learn agriculture, and yes, give them cows and plows. So under treaties 4, 5, 6, and 10, the Crown promised agricultural benefits, livestock, farming equipment, and that was promised to all the First Nations who signed this treaty. JD, I'm going to let you have a stab at what happens next.
Oh, boy. So, dear listeners, if you're not familiar with Indigenous people, we kind of got a big raw end of the deal here.
Yeah.
Nothing really came through. There was a mass destruction of our culture. People were basically forced into starvation conditions, weren't allowed to use our languages or practice our beliefs or even gather in large groups anymore. Mm-hmm. And none of the promises were actually delivered upon, except for the fact that, you're going to be stuck in this one area and report to your Indian agent if you ever want to leave, and he's not going to let you.
Yep. Worlds crushed, people displaced, definitely no cows, no plows. Mm-hmm. The agreement was never fulfilled, but 149 years later, that all changes. So since 2016, Lac La Ronge Reserve has been working on a claim against the government for not fulfilling this treaty. And in August of 2024, they finally announced that there has been a settlement of just over $600 million in compensation to the Lac La Ronge Reserve. And this is one of the largest settlements in Canadian history that's ever been done. Mm-hmm. And that means that anybody who applies from Lac La Ronge could receive $10,000 or more if they claim the estate of loved ones who've also passed since over the last 150 years. Mm-hmm. These are called the Treaty Agricultural Benefits, aka cows and plows. And in order for this settlement to happen, Lac La Ronge residents had to actually vote on whether or not they wanted to accept this settlement. Obviously, that meant that there was some debate around this. It meant discussions around the value of a long-awaited compensation, discussions around how if residents are compensated now, that they might not get supported by the Canadian government in the future. So the vibe that I got online of people talking about this settlement happening and the cows and plows and all that stuff, it's ultimately a little bit bleak because the vibe that I was getting was well, the government has kind of screwed us for long enough already. We might as well just take what we can get. Yeah. So I don't know, JD, how does this sit with you?
It's funny because this is my hometown, but I'm also a member of Peter Ballantine Cree Nation, which is based out of Prince Albert in the south with the rest of my family. Mm-hmm. But, we just kind of moved around. And that's our people, the Rocky Cree, are from a little bit more to the, what's in the map in my head, east of La Ronge and Sandia Bay, Flin Flon areas. But no, that's just saying that I don't get to vote in that referendum. Yeah. But nonetheless, I completely understand that feeling of general hopelessness. If you can get anything at this point, then people are yeah, I'll take it because we have there's nothing left there. It pains me to say, but colonization was extremely effective. I mean, there's still people that deny the genocide that it was, and they want to dress it up in terms cultural genocide or say it wasn't so bad. I mean, I'm a mixie myself. I always say I'm mixie. But my father's white. I met him later in life, and I remember having a discussion with him once. And plain as day, just out of the blue, I don't think we were even talking about this, but this is the mindset of, because he's a retired RCMP as well. So then there's that history.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. I got a lot of conflicting feelings.
That's complicated.
But I was the product of full disclosure. I'm not ashamed of it. It does happen. It's a plot device in film and TV. But I was a one night stand. And there you go. It happens. Yeah, it does happen. And so we've built this relationship over a couple of decades after I'd come to meet him and stuff. But him sitting, I just picture him sitting around with a bunch of other white folks having this discussion and being perfectly fine. He says, I think Native people here should be grateful for the English being the ones that colonized them, because if the Spanish did, it would have been a lot worse. And I'm like, what? You won't? Yeah.
Love you too, Dad.
Which is the most insane thing you could possibly, you need to be grateful that guy only cut off your arms because that other guy across the street got his arms and legs cut off. So go say thank you to that guy that cut off your arms. Go and kiss him on the lips. And
that's a dynamic for sure.
And that's just a common, it just blows my mind that to this day, I'm still explaining residential schools to people for the, it's like the first time that, can you actually, because we never talked about it in my family. What? And the work's never done. So I understand people just wanting to take what they can get, if that's what they can get, because it's tough.
But let me turn this over to Facebook, because Facebook is where Cows and Plows, the meme, is going off the charts. The Lac La Ronge Facebook group is stoked. We've got all these people who are about to get $10,000. And at time of recording, people could see that money coming into their bank accounts like any day now. So it's like a whole bunch. It could be like tomorrow, could be a couple days ago. So on Facebook, people are literally counting down the days. They're posting like those big Facebook like posts where it's like the background color with like a big headline kind of thing being like 12 days of counting. People are making memes to it, like to the 12 days of Christmas, and people are putting all these things in the comments. They're discussing what they're going to do when they get their 10K. People are talking about how there's going to be all these C&P weddings, C&P babies popping up all over the place. There's this TikTok trend that goes... So there's a TikTok trend that goes, if I won the lottery, you couldn't tell, but there would be signs. And then like the video basically cuts to like a fridge full of pickles or something like that. So people in Lac La Ronge are doing this, but like posting photos of like dogs on snowmobiles and stuff. And being like, when the Cows and Plows hits, somebody posted a photo that they just saw of an entire house being moved down the road on the back of a truck. And then the comment is just like, the signs of Cows and Plows are coming. Like, people are making so much hilarious content online, just being like, we're just like there's a lady who must be a very well-known local bus driver who basically runs this Facebook group. And she posted a photo of like a school bus hybrid with a Mercedes being like, when that Cows and Plows hits, like, people are having a lot of fun. And I just like love the culture of like, what are you going to do with your plows and cows? JD, as a Cree First Nations man, is this what reconciliation is really all about?
Oh God, no! But at the same time, yeah. You know what? Why can't we get a chance to be irresponsible and just open up an entire can of Spam between two slices of bread instead of having to thinly slice them? You know?
Exactly.
Like we haven't gotten that opportunity. You know, like, oh my gosh. Yeah, you know what? There's still gonna be that one random warrior out there that's gonna invest that whole thing wisely and just have a lovely 401k waiting for him or something. So it'll even out. It'll even out. There'll be a lot of irresponsibility, but there'll be a lot of good stuff too. So
but people
we deserve that opportunity. Yes, they're stoked, and they should be.
Yes,
they should
100%.
be. Absolutely. If anything, you know, I would just buy a lawn chair and go sit out on Main Street of La Ronge and just watch the people go by and whatever new toys that they decide to buy and be like, okay, good for you, I guess.
Anybody who's in Lac La Ronge around November 2024, please let us know what ended up happening. So the Lac La Ronge Facebook group is also how I found out that there is apparently this like giant pop-up CIBC truck that has been like basically touring around Canada over the last like few years and going to small communities in Canada that are getting Cows and Plows like benefits. and signing people up to their bank like en masse. People just like walk up to the trailer and open a bank account.
Holy shit.
And like the comments, people seem generally happy about this, that like it's easy for people to go and open up a bank. This feels very predatory to me.
It's extremely predatory. I mean, but also like, yeah, smart business bank guy, dude. Like that's really aggressive is
intense.
What that is. But yeah. And you know, there's a scene in Killers of the Flower Moon with all the Indians with their big oil money suddenly, right? And then there's that guy selling them the car and like, you go ahead and you take this here car, yeah? And it tell you what, it breaks down, you get a flat tire, come on, I'll buy you another one. I'll give you a new car at a discount. Like, you know, like just straight up like, I'm not going to fix your tire. I'm going to sell you a new car now. Yeah.
It's that. They're probably giving people mortgages, putting them in debt. Like, it's insane. And like this truck apparently is so familiar in this area of Saskatchewan that like people will see it in other towns or driving down the highway and be like, Cows and Plows is coming to us soon. Because we've seen it. It's like Santa Claus kind of thing.
It's on the way. Yeah.
It's on its way. So that's happening. CIBC currently on tour, on Cows and Plows tour. So pay attention to a community near you, I guess.
This makes me so happy. And, you know, you're making me feel even more connected to my community that I'm so far away from. So
I'm so glad.
That's good. I'll reference that. I'm going to call up my cousin out there and just be like, have you seen it? Have you seen the truck?
Talk to me about the culture of snowmobiling in La Ronge.
Well, it's more commonly referred to as skidooing.
Yes, that's true.
Ronge.
We are in northern Canada.
Northern Canada. That's right, where we have our own thing. We have our own vocabulary. Chocolate milk is not chocolate milk. It's Vico. Hoodies are bunny hugs, right? You mess yourself up badly, then you get gibbled. That's the thing, right? You know? There's a whole bunch of little idioms that we use out there. And it's very funny, very, very cool. But yes, skidooing is a big time thing because at least when I was growing up, I think they've gotten shorter since the winters. Like it was a good solid 6 months of the year is winter. And when I was a kid, for sure, by now, there's snow on the ground and people are skidooing in La Ronge. Right now, I have no idea what these weird...
Can confirm there is snow on the ground at time of recording.
Oh, good.
I saw it on Facebook.
Good. That's good. Oh, also side note, since there is snow on the ground in La Ronge, I could say Wittigo.
Ooh, what is that?
Yeah. Oh, that is the cannibal spirit. That he's very scary. And when people go mad and eat the flesh of other people, they become the Wittigo. And so you can't say it unless there's snow on the ground. From outside my window, I can see snow in the mountains. So I'm going to count that. Hopefully I don't get attacked. You don't say that if there is no snow, though.
I'm not saying it. There's no snow near me.
Okay, good to know. Anywho, and also if you have a skidoo, you can outrun those fuckers. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Everybody would always do skidoo stuff, you know. I recently filmed this movie, and one of the producers on it was from La Ronge, and he was telling me he's a couple years older than me, and he remembers one of the best bush parties he ever went to, and they all drove out on the ice for like 20 minutes, and there's this big fleet of trucks and skidoos, and all that you see is the darkness and headlights driving across the big clear lake, and they went out to this cabin way off in one of the islands, because there's literally hundreds and hundreds of these islands out there. The lake system's huge. And so they all drove out there, which is just an incredible, magical thought. And they just partied till dawn, you know, and everyone was out there having a grand old time. And yeah, that's the life of the
North.
North.
A great, perfect segue that was, because I have a story about something just like that for you. March 2022, 3 cousins, Thomas, Ron, and Julian, all set out one morning from La Ronge on their snowmobiles, on their skidoos, for a weekend-long trip at a cabin on the lake. one of those cabins on one of very many islands out there in this massive lake system. It is really, truly beautiful. Like, I highly recommend everybody look up photos of this place. So the lake is covered in thick ice and they make it across, no problem. But when they get across, they discover that the snow is starting to get pretty slushy and pretty deep. JD, what do you do next?
If it's getting real slushy, what's the setup of this cabin? Because that's the first option, is to wait it out.
The cabin, they're not even at the cabin yet. They've just made it across the lake. They've still got kilometers to go to the cabin.
Oh no! So they're on foot and they're hiking.
Well, yeah, they could be. I don't know. They've just got across the lake and they've noticed it's quite slushy and pretty deep.
Oh yeah. Well, then your truck's going to get stuck, most likely. Honestly, if I was thinking clearly, I might loop it around and head back where I came from. If I was like, oh no, we're not going to hit this cabin. I'm going to.
Yeah. See, that's where I thought would be the logical next step is you can't move forward. Let's just go back. The cousins decide to tread on instead. And soon enough, the Skidoos get stuck. And for an hour, they spend an hour trying to pack down all of this snow to get like enough traction to get the vehicles out. They have no success. And that's no problem, though, because it's only 9:30 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. and they have a satellite communicator. So they put out a signal for help and then just like walk to the shore and make up a little camp in the meantime. So they're just like hanging out at 10:30 a.m. It's kind of sunny, but it's winter out. So it's like a nice day. And they do get a fire going. They use a chainsaw to make a bunch of benches to go around like a little fire pit that they've built, and they dry off some of their wet stuff in the sun. But all of a sudden it's 4:30 and they're still hanging out by this campfire. At this point, they set up an iPad and start watching a movie together. And then finally, 4 Canadian search and rescue rangers show up on their Skidoos. They also all immediately get stuck. So,
oh no.
All 7 of them then spend the next 6 hours trying to get these Skidoos out of the slush before they finally get Ron's vehicle out. JD, what do you think is the next best move? It's 10 p.m., 7 stranded guys, at least 6 stuck Skidoos, 1 that's accessible. What do you think what do we do here?
Well, if you got 1 that's running and accessible and you don't have a pull cable to start getting a little more of them into more of a tractionally spot to help the other guys get out, I'd probably say it's late right now for survival's sake.
It's also March.
It's also March. Yeah. So it's still cold up there. It's still freezing. I would say our lightest combination of lightest and best driver will take the sled and get back and make sure that, help is reported and everyone knows where they are. That's what I would say.
Okay, great. That's not what they do.
Good.
So the Rangers decide that Ron should actually go up alone to the cabin that they were originally trying to go to. It's kilometers away, but they say you should go there and start warming it up for everybody because we're all going to be there, I guess, at some point. So he hops on his Skidoo. Before he does that, they say, actually leave your emergency pack behind. So he leaves his emergency pack behind for whatever reason, hops on the Skidoo, and off he goes. He makes it about 6 kilometers before his Skidoo gets stuck again. Meanwhile, back at camp, Thomas and Julian finally get their snowmobiles free. And for some reason, they're also told to go ahead to the cabin and leave their emergency packs behind as well. So, they scoot up the same path as Ron and get stuck in the same spot. So now the 3 cousins are all stuck in a new spot and the Rangers are all still stuck at the original spot. One of the Rangers is finally able to move their snowmobile and they drive it out, find the guys who are all stuck. But the Ranger just tells them, he just gets there and looks at them and is like, yeah, the other Rangers are still stuck too, and just turns around and leaves. So this is when the panic really starts to set in with the 3 cousins. JD, How survivally inclined would you say that you are to be stuck in the middle of the forest?
I would say not at all, but apparently a whole fuck lot more than these guys. Like already, I'm backing down. That's where I am. Like
you've been backing down twice at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
You've gone back and forth across the lake numerous times.
Well, yeah, like I would have said, you guys need to buckle down, and things are rough right now. And if you can get back, get back. But I'm gonna go and make sure that we actually get somebody with like some proper tow cables and everything, and we'll be back at first light. But okay, so now I'm just dead. Straight up. Like, I'm going to freeze to death. I don't have an emergency kit. I got a Skidoo, so what can I don't even have a tarp I could put over it so I could like warm up the engine and
mind you, you've also spent like basically the equivalent of 8 hours just trying to get a Skidoo out of the snow. You've built a fire, you've collected firewood, you've been on and off numerous times. You're pooped at this point. I don't know about you, but I'm a fan of like survival reality TV shows. I've watched like numerous episodes of Naked and Afraid.
Alone is great.
Alone, like there's so many great shows out there. And I like personally have fully convinced myself that I could win each one of them, especially as like a former 16-year-old forest ranger.
Good for you.
But these guys all have luckily they all have traditional trapping skills. They have a ton of experience outdoors and have been taught how to live off the land since they were really young. But even they are freaking out at this point. So the guys all try to They try to walk back to camp where the rangers are. The slush is too deep. Ron hasn't felt his feet in like hours. And the temperature drops to negative 35 Celsius with the wind chill. So they decide that instead they're going to go to like the closest shoreline, set up a fire, and make an inventory of everything that they've got to survive on. So here's what they've got. They've got 1 can of Coke, a package of noodles, a chocolate bar, lighters, matches, and a can of Old Spice body spray. JD, what are you doing with these materials to survive the night?
Well, considering I've been working my ass off for a while, first thing is that Old Spice body spray, because if I'm going to die smelling good. I mean, I guess if anything, they got a little makeshift blowtorch, not just to start a fire with, but also to ward off a bear, I suppose, if he gets a little bit too nosy. So it's a little bit of scary thing there. But starting a fire, make a lean-to, right? Like, I'd imagine that's all the energy that you got and just kind of huddled together for warmth. And the three of you should be able to make it through the night, hopefully.
Yeah. You were definitely onto something with the Old Spice there. So they use the Old Spice spray and a lighter as a blowtorch to start a fire. They collect a bunch of wood. They split the Coke, and then they use the can to heat up water and boil water from the
Smart
snow.
Men. Yeah.
And then a ranger finally shows up. This has got to be like 1 a.m. or something at this point. Like so late, so cold, so dark. Ranger shows up briefly, leaves again.
Doesn't leave him anything?
No. I don't even know why. This story just says the ranger shows up and leaves. So I think at this point they're just like checking on the guys to make sure they're still alive. But they like the rangers, I think, are consumed and like try to keep themselves alive at this point because they've got stuck and have limited gear, even though they have everybody else's emergency kits. I don't know.
That's insane. That's the
mystery.
most insane part of this whole story is that too. Okay.
So finally, Thomas starts to get really worried, and he starts filming videos on his phone to his loved ones because he's worried that he's going to be found dead and frozen, and his energy is like totally depleting. They end up spending the entire night freezing their butts off, wondering whether or not they're going to die, just cozy by the fire. And then the next morning, they decide that they are going to use all the wood that they have left, and they build a gigantic ass fire. And luckily, that makes smoke big enough for the rangers who are out that morning with a fresh crew to see and finally rescue them. So,
good. I thought this was going to be terrible.
What is the lesson here that Larongians should be learning?
If you're Indian and a bunch of white guys show up and say they're going to help you, they're not.
They will never
They'll
help.
never help you. Don't trust them. How many times do we have to take this lesson? Also, yeah, leave us with your stuff, guys. We'll get it to you. Promise.
Craziest part. The craziest part.
I don't know. I guess just the fact that it is sweet that they stuck together. And yeah, and honestly, if that was never go alone for one thing, you're going to do something like that. Yeah, never go alone. That's just asking for death. 3 is a good group. There's a good size for avoiding the basics of trouble. So at least they managed that.
Yeah. None of them made it
the first
to the
guy going
cabin.
by himself was crazy.
That's a crazy move to me. I would never. I would have stayed
leave
there.
your pack, go off alone into the badness. We know it's bad that way. No, that
Or leave the guys there, go back across the lake and get help.
Exactly. That was the plan that I think would have been, because you already made that journey and you already have tracks to follow. All you got to do is go. The snow's packed and fine, I think. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
The questions that you and I have are the same questions that the cousins had. They quoted to CBC that tough choices were made, and they hope that the Rangers get proper training and equipment to avoid potential errors in future rescues. The Rangers went on to say that they've responded to 5 ground crew search and rescues in northern Saskatchewan since then. And after every single one, there is a review. So they are trying to do better and less stupid things.
Let's just add to the problems. Yeah. Yeah. Throwing gas on the fire is not a good idea, Rangers. Okay. But thanks for getting them out of there in the morning, I guess, with a whole bunch of new people showing up.
Is it the thought that counts? No.
Yeah.
I'm going to say no this time.
Thoughts and prayers do nothing. Okay.
Okay, JD, you've brought me a juicy story about your hometown. I don't know if it's real, if you made it up, or if it's something that you just heard through the grapevine. I'm going to guess which one at the end. All I know is it has to do with Chicken Delight, I think. So please, go ahead, spill your hometown tea.
Adjacent. So,
yes.
So this is through a few different sources here that I was getting it, but La Ronge being this little blip on the map. First off, I'm going to start off with: have you guys ever seen, for the 5 people out there that have never seen, Breaking Bad?
Oh yes.
Yeah, story of meth dealing and all of the craziness that entails, and then the character in there called Gus Fring, who runs a little chicken shack and is the king of the meth empire.
Okay.
So
yeah, you're setting a picture here now.
Exactly. That's the artistry, baby. Okay.
It's almost like this is your craft.
There is a woman known as Hong Kong's Ice Queen, Li Chaoping. She was once upon a time the world's biggest crystal methamphetamine producer.
Okay.
And yes, and she came to Canada under this investment visa thing. You give a couple $100,000, you get a visa to be in Canada. Ended up bringing her family. And they were scouting. And of course, the heads of a lot of these criminal empires don't have any criminal records. So immigration can't flag them. And legally, you can't stop people without criminal records, even though they're suspected of. And she was de facto, in fact, it's redundant, the head of the world's biggest crystal meth manufacturing.
Cool.
Yeah. Production company.
Not great, but.
And she went to La Ronge, Saskatchewan, of all places, to set up a chicken shack.
Interesting.
To launder her money from. So they were there scouting this area before she ended up having to go on the run. So this was apparently almost going into full swing. She went up there twice, looked at investing in this thing, promised that she was going to, and then ended up having to disappear. Hasn't really been seen since. I think her empire has fallen. But this was, we came this close to having like a big hub of crystal meth being manufactured out of La Ronge. from Chinese gangsters. Like, I mean, that's kind of
From Chicken Delight.
from Chicken Delight. It could have been Chicken Delight. That's what I mean. Because Chicken Delight sadly burnt down. And that made me really sad. Chicken Delight is gone, and so is the Aurora Theater that was next to it, where I saw Pulp Fiction, another great criminal movie.
Oh, cool. JD, can you describe Chicken Delight? Because I pulled up a link that I saved here from Facebook, of course.
Oh, beautiful.
And yeah, it's a photo of like an old photo of the restaurant, Chicken Delight, probably from like the 80s or something.
Love it.
And like there's comments on comments on comments. There's 379 likes, 43 comments, 149 shares. Like people in town have been spreading this around, and everybody has been just like commenting on it, on their experience of going to Chicken Delight and having like the best time ever. But then I've read that there was like a lounge inside and like a fireplace or something where it was like set up. It does sound like a little like mafia-esque. I don't know what.
I couldn't say that it was. No. You know, they're probably talking about, well, I mean, because next door is this other place called Costa's Restaurant that looks like a teepee, and it does have a beautiful fireplace and lounge and things like that. So maybe they're talking about going next door. But they had an outdoor picnic area at Chicken Delight, which is the screen door area. Yeah, you go sit there and smoke, and you know, it'd have a. Yeah, you're just chicken. But also, they also had a arcade. It was the town's arcade, and that's where I learned pinball and a bunch of classic video games like Golden Axe and Pac-Man and all that stuff. And a movie theater with one screen called the Aurora Theater. And it was all connected.
This is what was tripping me up. I was like, there's like arcades and a theater. Here's one of the comments, and I was confused by it. The theater video games, the chicken, ooh, the memories. Try to get it all in the horror movies. We always tried to take that one older buddy so we could get in.
Yeah, they didn't care if they, as long as they got their money and they're trying to do their due diligence. It is the North, and we're seeing some scary stuff. Small town. Yeah, whatever. You got a 16-year-old with you. All of you 10-year-olds, go ahead, go with him. He'll be responsible for your nightmares. Good.
Wow, how fun. So the chicken place was also the movie theater, was also the arcade, but it was like 3 different stores, but the same store.
Yeah, exactly. You enter in on the facing the building. If you went in on the far right, that was the chicken and the fries. And to be honest, I mean, they had their own special je ne sais quoi, something about them. Again, being redundant. But KFC was where it was at. And at that time, I don't know if it was just because they weren't as big on animal cruelty laws. I don't know. Maybe that's what made them that special flavor. From when I was young, KFC doesn't taste the same now.
It wasn't their secret blend of herbs and spices.
No, it was the cruelty.
It was the cruelty.
It was the absolute cruelty and how they raised those chickens back then. So that was the chicken, the orange pop. I always got orange pop. I was a big Orange Crush kid when I was young. And then if you went in the middle door, that was where the arcade was, and then you could enter into the movie theater from there as well.
Wow,
And,
this sounds like an establishment. R.I.P. for it having been burnt down. I think that your story is true.
My story is actually, yeah, it's mostly true. She did go to La Ronge twice. The rumors were that she was actually looking at starting up the thing before she kind of went poof. So she hasn't seen her family in a while and stuff. As far as I knew, I don't know what happened with this lady. But
so this lady's gone forever.
Of her. Well, there's a rare photo of her online from 1992, living in Vancouver, and this is where her husband and a couple of children live, and she's gone. So,
wow, this is all very interesting. Wow, I love this. I love like shady shit happening in the North, but like in a fun way,
Yeah.
This is the kind of shady shit I like to see. Just like weird businesses, possible money laundering. That's fun.
Exactly.
That's fun stuff.
You know what I was thinking too? I mean, if maybe she did succeed, maybe that's why we got a crystal meth problem in the North now. I don't know.
Well, I was thinking I thought it was a fentanyl problem everywhere in Canada at this point. So
that is too, yeah.
Opioids in Canada are living their best life apparently. So we can all live our worst. And that's on Canada. Yeah. JD, thank you so much for coming on Canardian. Where can people find you? What are you up to? How can people support your stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm on Actors and Ancestors, actorsandancestors.com, podcast where I'm just doing my best to be a small part of the machine that pushes Indigenous people forward, because I'm tired of pretendians making all the news. And frankly, again, if I can loop back into having to explain people what residential schools are and things like that, my podcast were Indigenous people talking to Indigenous people, so we don't have to spell that out repeatedly. So, you can do your own homework and listen to our show, which is great. But also just the fact that people will know these fake people that make the news, and they don't know who like some of our greats are right now. I was so excited talking about how I just interviewed Wes Studi, arguably the most famous Indigenous actor. He's the only one to win an Oscar for acting, Lifetime Achievement. Lily Gladstone right now is probably more well-known just in pop culture circles. Yeah, I definitely know Lily Gladstone. Yes, because, again, making the Oscars list and winning an Emmy and all that kind of stuff, too. But Wes has a long career, and he's kicked down a lot of doors for us, and none of us would be here without a guy like him and others that are like him that have done all the work. So it speaks volumes to our community, the fact that we're all still, even at his age, after a lifetime of nonstop doing this kind of stuff, still trying to uplift and help each other. And it's a good thing to see. At least we can reclaim that part of ourselves. Yeah, and there's so much more room
for Indigenous creators and storytellers and actors and media makers and all of that stuff. So keep making your podcast, because we need it.
Thank you. And maybe check out what's coming out. Apparently in the spring, I got a movie coming out called Sweet Summer Powwow. They're hoping for early year. Yeah, Sweet Summer Powwow. It's like a better version of a Hallmark movie.
Okay, I'm Katie Lohr. You can find me through all the links in the show notes, or you can subscribe to my Substack, Pod the North, at podthenorth.com. The Canardian theme song is by my very talented fiance, Mark Allen, with support from his hometown buddies Ben Cousins, Brad Cousins, Jordan White, Shane Fester, and me. And if you like this podcast, or you know somebody from La Ronge, Saskatchewan, please share it with that friend, or just like somewhere on social media where people can find it and listen to the show. Okay, I'll see you around town.